Are Americans losing their charm in Europe? In 2025, anti-American sentiment is hitting unprecedented levels across the continent. From cultural clashes to political disagreements and long-standing historical grudges, these tensions are reshaping perceptions of the U.S. But is it all justified? Americans in Europe, are they admired or abhorred? Today, we uncover the 10 European nations where frustrations with the U.S. are at an all-time high. Brace yourself, some of the reasons behind this hostility might shock you. Let's dive into the list and explore the rising tide of skepticism towards Americans in Europe. Number 10, Czech Republic. With only 38% of locals viewing Americans favorably in 2025, a noticeable drop from 41% in 2024. This Central European nation, known for its historic charm, seems to be losing patience with what locals perceive as an overbearing American presence. Anti-American protests in Prague last year revealed growing frustration over economic dominance by U.S. tech giants, with critics accusing them of squeezing out local businesses and exploiting resources without benefiting Czech citizens. Political tensions have exacerbated the situation. Czechs express dissatisfaction with U.S. policies that they believe undermine European unity. Controversial remarks by American politicians about Europe's dependence on the U.S. for defense have sparked debates over sovereignty and self-reliance. Locals resent what they see as patronizing attitudes, further driving anti-American sentiment. Adding to this, Czech cultural critics often lament the impact of Hollywood's global influence. They argue that American films and TV shows perpetuate stereotypes about Eastern Europe, portraying it as backward or undeveloped. This not only offends locals but also undermines the rich cultural history the nation prides itself on. Despite these issues, the Czech Republic remains a popular tourist destination. However, visitors from the U.S. may notice subtle frostiness in their interactions with locals. While most are polite, there's an underlying resentment toward the growing Americanization of their society, especially in urban centers like Prague. Number 9. Poland. They takes place with American favorability dropping to 45% in 2025, a decline from 48% the previous year. While the U.S. remains a strategic ally, ordinary Poles are growing weary of what they perceive as overreach in their domestic and foreign affairs. Recent protests in Warsaw highlighted concerns over the U.S. military presence, with many arguing that it compromises Poland's sovereignty and exacerbates environmental issues around military installations. Economically, frustrations are mounting. Polish businesses often struggle to compete with American corporations, which locals feel exploit their market without contributing meaningfully to Poland's economy. Trade agreements that disproportionately favor the U.S. are another sore point, fueling the narrative that Poland is being used rather than genuinely supported. Culturally, some Poles feel that American tourists lack respect for local traditions. Complaints about loud behavior, disregard for historical landmarks, and cultural insensitivity are common. This perception feeds into the broader narrative that Americans are oblivious to the nuances of other cultures, further alienating them from Polish society. Poland's geopolitical alignment with the U.S. complicates this dynamic. While the government prioritizes strong ties with Washington, the growing resentment among its citizens suggests that the alliance is far from universally celebrated. For U.S. travelers, this means navigating a complex mix of friendliness and underlying skepticism during their visit. Number 8, Hungary. With just 34% of Hungarians viewing Americans favorably in 2025, Hungary claims the 8th spot on our list. The nation's deep-rooted nationalism often clashes with what locals perceive as U.S. interference in their domestic affairs. Political leaders frequently criticize Washington for pushing liberal ideals that contradict Hungary's conservative values, a sentiment that resonates strongly with the population. Anti-American protests in Budapest last year underscored these tensions, with demonstrators accusing the U.S. of cultural imperialism. The influence of Hollywood and American media is a particular sore point. Many Hungarians feel that their cultural identity is being eroded by the global dominance of American entertainment, which they argue prioritizes profit over authenticity. Economically, Hungarians express frustration over the presence of American corporations, which they believe exploit local labor and resources without contributing adequately to the national economy. Rural areas, in particular, feel left behind by globalization, which many associate with American economic policies. This disconnect fuels resentment toward the U.S. and its perceived role in Hungary's challenges. For tourists, Hungary remains a beautiful and welcoming destination. However, beneath the surface lies a palpable tension. Locals are increasingly vocal about their frustrations, making it clear that while Hungary values its independence, it has little patience for perceived American overreach. Number 7. Russia. With a dismal 20% of citizens viewing Americans favorably in 2025, down from 22% in 2024. The enduring animosity between these two nations has only deepened, fueled by ongoing political conflicts and mutual accusations of interference. State media in Russia continues to portray the U.S. as a global antagonist, a narrative that deeply influences public opinion. The expansion of NATO in 2024, coupled with U.S. sanctions, has been framed as direct threats to Russian sovereignty. These developments have solidified negative perceptions of America among ordinary Russians, who view Washington's actions as aggressive and self-serving. Cultural clashes further compound the issue. Russians often criticize what they perceive as American superficiality and materialism, contrasting it with their own values of resilience and tradition. Hollywood's portrayal of Russia as the perennial villain in movies and TV shows doesn't help, reinforcing stereotypes that many Russians find offensive. Anti-American protests in Moscow last year were some of the largest in recent history, with participants decrying U.S. foreign policies and their impact on global stability. For American travelers, visiting Russia can be a challenging experience. While hostility isn't overt, the mistrust and skepticism are impossible to ignore, making interactions with locals fraught with tension. Number 6. Germany. With favorability dropping to 42% in 2025, compared to 45% in 2024. While Germany and the U.S. remain allies, economic and cultural friction has deepened the divide. The controversy surrounding U.S. surveillance programs resurfaced after revelations of continued data collection on European allies, angering German citizens who view this as a breach of trust. Economically, Germans express resentment over U.S. trade policies that they believe undermine European industries. The dominance of American tech companies like Amazon and Google has drawn criticism for stifling German innovation and exploiting local labor markets. Additionally, the environmental impact of these corporations often clashes with Germany's commitment to sustainability. Culturally, German citizens increasingly critique the American lifestyle, which they view as wasteful and consumer-driven. This criticism is particularly vocal among younger generations, who prioritize environmentalism and minimalism over the excess they associate with American habits. Meanwhile, Hollywood's portrayal of Germany often perpetuates stereotypes that locals find outdated and offensive. American tourists might find Germany's hospitality somewhat reserved, as subtle frustrations with American policies and attitudes become more pronounced in daily interactions. While Germans generally value politeness, their growing disenchantment with U.S. influence is hard to ignore. Number 5. Spain. With only 39% of Spaniards viewing Americans favorably in 2025, a decline from 42% in 2024. Despite its reputation for warmth and hospitality, Spain has grown increasingly critical of U.S. actions on both the global and local stage. The recent trade disputes over agriculture have hit a nerve, as Spanish farmers struggle to compete with heavily subsidized American imports. Cultural clashes are another source of tension. Spaniards often feel that American tourists fail to respect local traditions, particularly during major festivals like La Tomatina or Semana Santa. Complaints about loud and disruptive behavior have become more common, fueling the perception that Americans lack cultural sensitivity. Politically, Spain's frustration with U.S. foreign policies, particularly in the Middle East and Latin America, has alienated citizens who view these interventions as destabilizing. The U.S.'s perceived indifference to Spain's priorities within the European Union further strains the relationship. While Spain remains a favorite destination for American travelers, locals' growing dissatisfaction with U.S. influence is reflected in their increasingly guarded interactions with visitors. The warmth is still there, but so is the underlying critique of American attitudes and behaviors. Number 4. Italy. With favorability toward Americans dropping to 37% in 2025, down from 40% the previous year. Italians are known for their strong sense of cultural pride, and this often clashes with what they perceive as American arrogance. Hollywood's depiction of Italy as a land of mafia bosses and romanticized poverty continues to offend locals, who feel that their rich history and culture are oversimplified. Economically, Italians express frustration with American corporations dominating their markets, particularly in the food and fashion industries. The global spread of fast food chains like McDonald's is viewed as a threat to Italy's culinary heritage, sparking debates over cultural preservation. Meanwhile, U.S.-backed trade agreements are often criticized for favoring American interests at the expense of Italian producers. Politically, the U.S.'s handling of international crises, particularly in the Mediterranean, draws criticism from Italians who believe Washington's actions often exacerbate regional instability. This, coupled with growing anti-American protests in cities like Rome and Milan, highlights the increasing divide between the two nations. For American tourists, Italy remains a must-visit destination, but they might encounter locals who are less eager to engage. Italians. Growing discontent with American influence is becoming more apparent, even in the famously hospitable tourism industry. Number 3. France. With only 32% of citizens viewing Americans favorably in 2025, a sharp decline from 35% in 2024. The historical love-hate relationship between France and the U.S. has taken a turn for the worse, fueled by cultural and political tensions. Many French citizens criticize what they see as the Americanization of global culture, which they believe undermines France's unique identity. Hollywood's portrayal of French culture often sparks outrage, with locals accusing the U.S. of perpetuating clichés that reduce their rich heritage to baguettes and berets. This frustration is compounded by the dominance of American media, which many French citizens see as a threat to their own artistic and literary traditions. Politically, France's opposition to U.S. foreign policies, particularly in Africa and the Middle East, reflects broader public disapproval. Many French citizens view these interventions as self-serving, undermining global stability rather than promoting peace. The recent fallout over military collaborations in Africa has only deepened the rift. American tourists in France often encounter a mix of politeness and subtle disdain. While the French are proud of their hospitality, their growing resentment toward American influence is palpable, particularly in major cities like Paris. Number 2. Greece. With American favorability plummeting to 28% in 2025, down from 31% in 2024. Economic tensions play a significant role, as Greeks blame U.S.-backed austerity measures for their ongoing financial struggles. The perception that Washington prioritizes corporate interests over ordinary citizens fuels anti-American sentiment across the country. Culturally, Greeks often feel that American tourists lack respect for their ancient heritage. Incidents of vandalism or disrespect at iconic sites like the Acropolis have sparked outrage, reinforcing negative stereotypes about American behavior abroad. Locals also criticize the commercialization of Greek culture in Hollywood, which they feel distorts their history for entertainment purposes. Politically, Greece's strained relationship with the U.S. is exacerbated by disagreements over regional conflicts and refugee policies. Many Greeks view American actions in the Middle East as a direct cause of the refugee crisis that has overwhelmed their nation. This frustration manifests in protests and growing hostility toward U.S. influence in Greek affairs. For American visitors, Greece remains a stunning destination, but the warmth they expect may be tempered by locals' growing dissatisfaction with U.S. policies and behaviors. Number 1. Turkey. Where only 15% of citizens view Americans favorably in 2025, a stark decline from 18% in 2024. The deteriorating relationship between the two nations stems from a mix of political, economic, and cultural tensions. U.S. support for Kurdish groups in Syria continues to be a major flashpoint, with Turkish citizens viewing this as a direct threat to their national security. Economically, Turks express frustration over U.S. sanctions and trade policies that they believe unfairly target their nation. The dominance of American corporations in Turkey's market is another sore point, fueling the perception that Washington prioritizes its own interests at Turkey's expense. Culturally, Turks often critique American attitudes, which they see as dismissive of their traditions and values. Hollywood's portrayal of the Middle East, including Turkey, frequently draws ire for perpetuating negative stereotypes. This cultural disconnect reinforces the narrative that the U.S. lacks understanding or respect for the region. For American travelers, Turkey presents a complex mix of hospitality and skepticism. While locals are famously welcoming, their growing resentment toward U.S. influence is unmistakable, making interactions more nuanced than ever. And there you have it, the top 10 European countries where Americans face the most skepticism in 2025. While these nations have their own unique reasons for their attitudes, one thing is clear: cultural misunderstandings, political differences, and economic tensions play a significant role. As global citizens, it's a reminder that bridging these gaps requires mutual respect and understanding.